People like you don't belong in this lobby." The words slammed across the marble floor like a gavel. No hesitation, no shame, just loud enough for every camera lens to catch it. The woman in the yellow dress leaned forward, her palm pressed hard against his cheek, as if she could push him out of existence with a single touch. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones rose higher. The security guard, crisp white shirt straining at the seams, clamped down on the black man's arm like he was restraining a criminal. The contrast was brutal. Her finger on his face, the guard's grip on his body, and in his free hand, a phone resting calm and unshaken. He didn't flinch, didn't shout. He stood rooted, eyes steady, silence louder than her venom. "This is a private hotel," she barked, voice pitched for the audience. "You people always sneak in, flashing fake cards, pretending like you belong. Not here, not today." Each phrase wasn't policy, it was poison dressed as authority. The cameras drank it in. A man in a lime green jacket leaned forward with a broadcast rig, red recording light pulsing. Behind him, guests whispered. One muttered, "Did she just say that?" Another shook his head. "I can't believe this is happening in public." The guard shoved lightly, a show of force designed for humiliation, not harm. Enough to send a message, not enough to leave a bruise. But still the crowd gasped, because everyone could feel the intent. It wasn't about removing him, it was about erasing him. And yet, he refused to move. His stillness mocked their fury. He looked less like a man being expelled, and more like a monument refusing to be toppled. The lobby doors framed the scene like a stage. Tourists slowed their steps, raising phones. A clerk at the front desk bit her lip, eyes flicking nervously from the manager to the man in white. Her conscience whispered what her mouth couldn't. This was wrong. The manager's hand lingered on his cheek, trembling with self-righteousness. She wanted him to react, to break the mask of calm, but he didn't. His silence was a blade, sharper than anything she could throw. "Security," she snapped. "Drag him out. He's a fraud. He's a thief." The guard tightened his hold. The cameraman zoomed closer, and the murmurs grew into a low tide of outrage. This wasn't removed. This was a spectacle. A ritual humiliation, performed in broad daylight, meant to remind a black man that power and dignity didn't belong to him. What she didn't know, what no one in that lobby yet understood, was that the man she had just labeled a thief was the one who signed her paycheck. The owner. The architect of the very building she thought she controlled. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter, and they spread because of you. Now, back to him, the man they tried to erase from his own lobby. He hadn't come here in a limousine. No entourage followed, no flash of Rolex, no designer suit, just a crisp white shirt, dark trousers, polished but plain shoes, and a phone tucked in his hand. To anyone else in the room, he looked like a man passing through nothing more. That was the point. His name, hidden for now, carried weight that could shift markets. But this morning, he wanted to be anonymous. He wanted to test the very ground he had built, to see whether his staff saw guests or just stereotypes. The lobby glittered with chandeliers and polished brass, a performance of luxury. But beneath the glow, eyes narrowed. From the moment he crossed the threshold, heads tilted with suspicion. The clerk at the desk barely looked up. The manager's smile was tight, rehearsed, more suspicion than service. And the guard? He had already been watching, as if waiting for permission to act. He knew this script well. At 19, he'd walked into a boutique hotel in Charlotte with his parents, dressed in Sunday best. They were told the lounge was for paying customers only. At 27, he'd tried to book a penthouse in Los Angeles after closing his first $1 million deal. The man behind the desk looked at his ID, then at his face, and said, "This can't be you." 2 decades later, standing in a lobby he owned, the same words hovered unspoken, written in every narrowed glance. "This can't be you." And so, he let them play it out. He walked across the marble, calm, deliberate, carrying only his presence. No briefcase, no bodyguard, no signpost of wealth. To the crowd, he was an outsider intruding on a stage he had no right to stand on. The irony burned, but not for him, for them, because they were humiliating the very man whose signature had built this empire. The woman in the yellow dress mistook his silence for weakness. The guard mistook his stillness for guilt. But what they couldn't see was that silence was armor. Stillness was strategy. Every insult, every shove, every cruel word, they were not breaking him. They were building the evidence. A tourist dragging a suitcase slowed down, eyes darting between the man in white and the staff who held him. "Why is he being treated like that?" she whispered to her husband. The husband shrugged, uneasy. Nearby, a young concierge clenched her jaw, recognition flickering in her eyes. She'd seen his name in the system just hours ago. She knew this was wrong. But the theater continued. The lobby had transformed into a stage where prejudice was dressed as protocol. And he, calm, unshaken, was letting them write their own downfall. They thought they were ejecting a stranger. In truth, they were revealing themselves to the world. "Security now!" The manager's voice cracked like a whip, sharp enough to slice through the chandelier glow. She jabbed a finger at him as if pointing out contraband. "This man doesn't belong here. He's trying to scam his way into our property." The guard tightened his hold, posture squared, ready to drag him toward the glass doors. His face wasn't angry, just cold, mechanical, like a man following routine. Only the routine wasn't protection. It was profiling. Phones tilted higher, guests shifted, some murmuring uneasily, others craning for a better view. A middle-aged couple near the grand piano whispered to each other, "Did she just call him a scammer?" The wife's brows furrowed. The husband looked down at his shoes, unwilling to meet the man's gaze. The manager leaned closer, her words venom disguised as policy. "We've seen your type before, flashing stolen cards, pretending to have reservations, thinking you can walk into a place like this." She smirked, glancing at the crowd, feeding on their attention. "Not here, not under my watch." Still, he said nothing. His silence irritated her more than any protest would have. "Say something," she barked, her voice rising above the hum of the lobby. "Where's your confirmation? Where's your ID? You can't just walk in off the street and demand access to our suites. Do you even have money for this place?" The words landed heavy. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A young woman pulling a stroller whispered, "That's not how you talk to a guest." But the manager ignored her. The guard gave a sharp tug at his arm, pulling him half a step toward the door. The cameras caught it. A flash popped. The tourist in the lime jacket shouted, "Why are you treating him like a thief?" No answer, just the manager's icy smile. She turned to the clerk at the front desk. "Flag his name. Run it against Fraud Watch. If it doesn't show, I want him banned permanently." The clerk froze, fingers hovering above the keyboard, sweat forming at his temples. He knew the name would show, but not in the way she expected. Guests muttered louder now. "This feels wrong." He hasn't even raised his voice. "She's going too far." The manager's eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you want me to call the police? Because that's where this is going. People like you always end up there." That sentence broke the air. Gasps echoed through the lobby. Someone near the revolving doors whispered, "She really said that?" Another raised their phone higher, recording every word. And still he stood unmoved, not because he lacked power, but because power didn't need to shout. The escalation wasn't his. It was theirs. And every second, the evidence built itself around them, brick by brick, insult by insult. The guard's hand clamped harder, a silent order to move. The crowd leaned in, waiting for an outburst, a struggle, some explosion of anger to justify the scene. But none came. He stood still. No shaking hands, no raised voice. Just a slow inhale, shoulders steady, eyes fixed on a point beyond the marble doors. His silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The entire lobby could feel it, even if they didn't yet understand. The manager's lips curled. "Cat got your tongue?" she mocked. Typical. When it's time to show proof, there's nothing. Empty words, empty pockets. Her laugh was brittle, the kind that tried to sound powerful but cracked under its own weight. Still, he didn't speak. Instead, he turned his head slowly, just enough for the crowd to catch the look in his eyes. Not fear, not shame, something else. A calm defiance, a message wordless yet unmistakable. You are writing your own downfall. The clerk at the front desk swallowed hard. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but he couldn't bring himself to type. He had seen that name earlier in the system, flagged not for fraud but for ownership clearance. The knowledge burned inside him. He glanced at the man in white, then back at the manager, trapped between truth and silence. Guests shifted again. A woman near the concierge desk whispered, "Why isn't he fighting back?" Her companion replied softly, "Because he doesn't need to." The guard grew uneasy. His grip remained firm, but the longer the man resisted without moving, the heavier the act felt. He wasn't dragging a trespasser anymore. He was holding something immovable, like trying to shove a wall. The manager leaned in close, her voice sharp. "You think standing there makes you look innocent? It makes you look weak. Like you know you don't belong," she sneered, her hand twitching as if tempted to push him again. But his stillness mocked her rage. Every insult bounced back, echoing louder because he refused to give it breath. In that silence, memories pressed in on him, late nights, building contracts nobody believed he could sign. Early mornings walking into meetings where his ideas were stolen before he'd spoken a word. Years of eyes like hers telling him, "You don't belong." He had learned long ago that raising his voice only gave them an excuse. But silence? Silence turned their cruelty into confession. A ripple of murmurs cut through the lobby. Someone said, "Why is she pushing so hard if he hasn't done anything?" Another voice added, "This looks bad, really bad." The man in white finally shifted, not with words but with presence. He straightened his spine, let the guard's grip weigh against him, and lifted his chin just slightly. That simple motion changed the room. He wasn't the accused anymore. He was the accuser, letting them testify against themselves. The manager didn't see it. The guard didn't see it, but the witnesses did. And their phones kept recording, capturing the moment silence became the loudest voice in the lobby. The red glow of a camera light blinked from the corner, steady, unrelenting. A tourist in a lime jacket had stepped forward, holding his rig high. His voice cut into the silence. "I'm filming this. People need to see how you're treating him." The manager snapped her head toward him. "Turn that off. Now. This is private property." To all. But the man didn't flinch. "Not anymore. You made it public the second you shouted across the lobby." His lens held steady, catching her scowl, the guard's grip, and the stillness of the man in white. Two guests near the piano pulled out their phones. One whispered, "This is discrimination." The other replied, "Keep recording. They'll deny it later." The air thickened. Luxury had drained from the room. Now it was courtroom tense. Every word spoken could become evidence. Every gesture could echo beyond the marble walls. Near the check-in desk, a young concierge named Elena shifted in her seat. She had recognized him the moment he walked in, recognized the name in the system hours earlier. A reservation marked executive override. Owner clearance. Her lips pressed tight. She wasn't supposed to speak, but her conscience roared louder than policy. The manager barked again. "Security, remove him." She gestured at the cameras. "He's trespassing. He's a fraud." "Yo." Elena stood halfway, her chair scraping against the tile. Her voice trembled but carried, "His name is in the system." The lobby froze. Eyes snapped to her. The manager's face flushed, then hardened. "Sit down, Elena. You don't know what you're talking about." But the words were already out, and guests heard them. Phones captured them. A mother with a stroller whispered to her teenage daughter, "Did you hear that?" She said, "He's really in the system." The daughter, wide-eyed, lifted her phone higher. The guard hesitated now, his grip less certain. He glanced between the manager and Elena, confusion breaking through routine. "Is this true?" he muttered under his breath. The manager hissed, "Don't listen to her. She's new. She doesn't understand protocol." Her tone was brittle, too defensive, too rehearsed. Another voice rose from the crowd, an older man in a gray suit near the revolving doors. "Why are you treating him like a criminal if he hasn't even raised his voice?" Murmurs rippled, louder now. "This isn't right. She's going too far. Let him speak." The man in white still hadn't spoken, but his silence had multiplied. It had spread into the crowd, transformed into their voices, their outrage. What began as one man standing alone was becoming a chorus. The manager rattled, snapped louder, "Everyone put your phones away. He doesn't belong here. He's trying to steal what isn't his." But the evidence was already out of her control. Every angle, every insult, every shove-it-all lived now in dozens of cameras, each one a witness ready to amplify the truth. And at the center of it all, the man in white remained calm, letting their fury turn the crowd against them. The manager's patience snapped like a brittle thread. She raised her voice, sharper, louder, determined to reclaim control she no longer held. "Enough of this circus. Your reservation is canceled. We don't tolerate deception in this hotel." The words slammed across the lobby. A couple near the fountain gasped. Elena stiffened, her mouth opening as if to protest, but the manager cut her off with a glare. "You don't belong here," she continued, her tone venom-coated in authority. "And if you don't leave now, I'll have the police escort you out in handcuffs. Do you understand me?" The guard shifted, uneasy. His grip loosened slightly. Even he sensed the performance had gone too far. But the manager doubled down, voice echoing through the marble hall. "People like you always think you can play the system, flash a card, drop a name, pretend like you're on the list. Well, not this time. Not under my watch." Phones buzzed as the words traveled instantly beyond the lobby. Guests whispered in outrage. "Did she really say that? That's racial profiling. She just dug her own grave." The man in white remained still. The stillness unnerved her. She mistook it for weakness, when in truth, it was control of himself, and soon, of the entire room. The older man in the gray suit spoke again, firmer this time. "Mom, you can't just cancel a guest's stay because you don't like how he looks." The manager snapped, "Stay out of this. This is my hotel." A sharp intake of breath ran through the lobby. Dozens of eyes darted back to the man in white. Their expressions shifted. Curiosity, then suspicion, then dawning realization. If this was her hotel, why did she look so desperate to prove it? The tourist in the lime jacket swung his camera toward the crowd. "You all heard that, right?" he asked, narrating into his stream. "She said it's her hotel, but the system says otherwise." Elena's voice finally broke free. "She's lying. His name is on the reservation list. I saw it myself this morning." The lobby erupted in murmurs. Some guests applauded softly, others raised their phones higher. The guard froze completely, caught between two conflicting orders, loyalty to his manager and the growing tide of truth swelling around him. The manager's face flushed red. She slammed her palm on the desk. "One more word out of you, Elena, and you're out of a job." Elena didn't back down. "Then fire me, but I won't lie for you." Her voice rang clear, trembling but resolute. Gasps echoed. Someone shouted, "Good for you!" Another voice called, "She's standing for the truth." The manager clenched her jaw, her authority slipping with every passing second. She turned back to the man in white, desperate to reassert dominance. "You hear me? You're done here. You're nothing. Get out before I make this worse for you." The silence that followed was heavier than her threats. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. They were waiting for him, waiting for the man in white to break his silence. And when he finally did, it wouldn't just end her authority, it would dismantle it. The breaking point arrived not with words, but with a gesture too blatant to ignore. The manager snatched the phone from his hand. Quick, aggressive. She held it high as if she had just confiscated contraband. "This device will be kept until the authorities arrive," she declared, her voice sharp enough to rattle the chandelier crystals above. Gasps ricocheted through the lobby. Phones filmed from every angle now. A woman near the elevators cried out, "That's theft." But the manager doubled down, her face flushed with a strange satisfaction. She slid the phone across the counter to the clerk. "Lock it up," she ordered. The clerk hesitated, his eyes darting to the man in white, then back at her. His hands trembled as he reached for the device. The guard tightened his grip on the man's arm again, this time pulling harder, forcing him a step toward the doors. "You're finished here," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Walk out while you can." The man in white remained steady, the pull against him only making his stillness more pronounced. He didn't fight. He didn't plead. He simply looked at the guard with calm eyes that unnerved more than any resistance could. The manager sneered, her voice rising higher, needing the audience as much as the victory. "See? He won't even deny it. Guilty silence. Classic scammer move. People like him always think they can bluff their way into luxury." Her words echoed, poisoning the air. Guests shook their heads. One man near the revolving doors muttered, "I can't believe this." "She just said people like him," another whispered back. "She doesn't even realize the whole world is recording." The young concierge Elena stood up fully now, fists clenched at her sides. "This is wrong," she said loudly, her voice carrying across the lobby. "He has a valid reservation. I saw it myself." The manager spun toward her, eyes blazing. "Sit down, Elena, or you're done." But Elena didn't move. Her stance, small but unshaken, drew murmurs of approval from the crowd. A tourist shouted, "She's right. You can't just steal his phone." Another voice added, "Give it back." The pressure mounted. The guard's grip faltered. uncertain. The clerk froze with the phone still in his hand, too afraid to lock it away. And in that crack of hesitation, the manager hurled her final insult. She leaned in close, so near her words brushed his ear, but loud enough for the cameras to capture. "You don't belong here. You never will. You're nothing but a thief dressed in white." The words landed like a slap, heavier than the shove, crueler than the theft. The lobby erupted gasps, shouts, phones flashing like lightning. And through it all, the man in white stood unmoved, his silence no longer just a shield. It had become the stage for their undoing. What they thought was humiliation had become evidence, and what they thought was control had just crossed into irreparable damage. The lobby buzzed with outrage, but he remained still. The guard's grip, the stolen phone, the manager's venom, none of it shook him. Instead, he exhaled slowly, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Then, without raising his voice, he spoke for the first time. "Enough. Again." The single word landed heavy, cutting through the noise. The guard froze. The manager blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift. Guests leaned in, sensing the current change. He extended his hand toward the clerk, who still clutched his phone nervously. "Return it." The clerk hesitated, eyes darting between the manager and the man in white. The manager barked, "Don't you dare!" But the authority in her tone cracked. The room wasn't listening to her anymore. The man in white's gaze never wavered, calm, commanding, relentless without being loud. Finally, the clerk's trembling fingers set the phone gently back into his palm. He pressed one button. The call connected instantly. "Nia," he said softly, his tone even steady. On the other end, the voice of his executive assistant carried through the speaker, clear enough for nearby cameras to catch. "I'm here. Protocol?" The manager's eyes widened. "Protocol? What kind of guest had protocols?" He didn't glance at her. He spoke as if she were already irrelevant. "Initiate Horizon audit. Log every word, every action. Secure the feed from lobby cameras." "Yes, sir," Nia replied. "Do you want legal on standby?" His voice cut like steel wrapped in velvet. "Standby. Not yet." The crowd murmured. Phones caught every syllable. The older man in the gray suit whispered, "He's not some random guest. Who is he?" The manager scrambled to recover. "What is this? Some stunt? You think calling a friend proves anything? This is my hotel, and you are trespassing." He turned his head slowly, finally meeting her glare. His eyes were calm, but the weight behind them made her step back half an inch. "No," he said evenly, "this is my lobby, and your time in it is over." The room erupted in whispers, gasps, disbelief. The guard released his arm completely, confusion flooding his face. Elena's lips curled into the faintest smile of relief. But he wasn't finished. He lifted the phone again. "Naya, escalate Horizon access protocols. Freeze management credentials in this building." "Yes, sir," came the instant reply. "Processing now." The words hung in the air like a guillotine. The crowd sensed something seismic was about to shift. The manager laughed, brittle and nervous. "You're bluffing. You can't just shut down a hotel with a phone call." He didn't answer her. He didn't need to, because at that very second, the overhead lights flickered, screens behind the check-in desk rebooted, and the employee system flashed red. The clerk's terminal beeped, flashing access revoked beside the manager's name. His eyes went wide. "It's real," he whispered. The lobby wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged, every breath held, every camera focused. The man in white stood taller, his silence broken not by shouting, but by commands that rewired the entire building in real time. The guard took a step back. The crowd leaned forward. The manager's confidence bled out of her face. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't dealing with a trespasser. She was dealing with the man who owned the ground under her feet. The manager's laughter rang hollow, echoing off marble and glass. "What are you trying to prove? You think some tech glitch means you own this place? You're delusional." But her words faltered when the clerk gasped. His monitor flickered again. Across the screen, bold letters scrolled, "System alert, ownership access override, executed by Carter Holdings." He covered his mouth. The name was unmistakable. He had read it countless times in company memos, never once expecting to see it attached to the man standing right in front of him. "Carter," he whispered, the syllables trembling out of him. "You're him." The crowd leaned in. Someone repeated it aloud, louder this time. Carter. Siwan. Phones zoomed closer, recording every twitch of realization. The man in white finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight that filled the lobby. Yes, Carter. The name on every paycheck, the signature on every contract. The one you dismissed as a thief in the very building I built. The words detonated in the silence. Gasps erupted. Guests muttered in disbelief. He owns this. That's the CEO? Oh my God. The guard stumbled back a step, his hands falling uselessly to his sides. His jaw worked silently, as if trying to form an apology he didn't know how to give. Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. She had been right. The truth was finally visible, undeniable. The manager's face drained of color. Her bravado collapsed under the weight of his revelation. No, that's impossible, she stammered. You don't look like... She cut herself off too late. Phones captured every syllable she had managed to spill. The crowd hissed, disgust rolling like a wave. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Finish that sentence. Go on. She couldn't. Her throat locked. You judged me by what you wanted to see, he continued. A trespasser, a fraud, a man out of place. But you never asked yourself the real question why you thought you belonged here more than I did. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They sliced clean, leaving nothing standing. A man in a navy suit near the elevators clapped once, sharply. Then again, soon, others joined applause, spreading through the lobby like fire catching dry grass. Not cheers of celebration, but recognition, a vindication. The tourist with the camera narrated into his mic, voice shaking with adrenaline. It's confirmed. He's the CEO. He's the owner of this entire hotel chain. And they tried to throw him out of his own lobby. The manager staggered back, her blazer slipping off one shoulder, her authority shredded in front of 100 witnesses. He took one step forward, closing the distance. Calm, controlled, inevitable. You called me a fraud in a lobby I own. You tried to erase me in front of the world. That was your last mistake. The crowd's energy shifted completely, no longer uncertain, no longer divided. The room had chosen. And the woman who moments ago commanded the lobby now looked smaller than anyone else. Inside it stripped bare, cornered by truth she could not escape. The revelation didn't just shift the room, it detonated it. The guard dropped his grip entirely, stumbling 2 steps back as though the man in white had suddenly grown 10 feet taller. His lips parted, whispering words too soft to carry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Behind the desk, the clerk's face was pale. He stared at the monitor, flashing Carter's name in bold authority, knowing that his hesitation had been recorded, his silence archived. His career teetered on the edge with every second. Elena, by contrast, stood straighter. The fear that had held her tongue before evaporated. Relief flooded her expression, vindication shining through. She had spoken the truth when it counted, and now the truth stood undeniable before everyone. The manager's collapse was visible in every twitch. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for an ally. None came. Guests glared openly now. A woman with a stroller muttered, "Shameful." A man in a suit shook his head, disgust etched into his frown. Cameras hovered closer, merciless. The lime-jacketed tourist leaned into his mic. You can see it, the staff is panicking. Look at them. They know they're finished. The manager raised a trembling hand, pointing at Elena as if clinging to one last scapegoat. She lied. She's covering for him. But no one believed her. The crowd booed softly, a sound rare for hotel lobbies but deafening in its judgment. The guard tried again, voice cracking. Sir, I was following orders. The man in white cut him off with a glance, no words needed. The guard's voice died instantly. The balance of power had shifted completely. The staff, once so loud, now looked cornered, shrunken, their authority stripped bare under the weight of their own actions. And in the center, the CEO stood calm, untouched, while the lobby itself seemed to bend toward him, guests forming a circle not to watch his humiliation, but to shield his dignity. The verdict of the room was clear. Justice had already begun. The silence after the collapse was heavy, charged, waiting. All eyes were fixed on him, the man they had called an intruder, now revealed as the owner. He lifted his phone again, his tone steady, almost gentle, but carrying the weight of judgment. Nia, he said, terminate credentials for Horizon staff in this lobby, effective immediately. The words rolled out calm as water, but the impact was seismic. A beat later, the clerk's monitor flickered. Red alerts flashed one by one. A CSS revoked Vance, Gregory, Hayes, Lauren, Patel, Kevin. Each name accompanied by a shrill beep. The guard's radio buzzed, then went dead in his hand. The manager's badge lit red, its magnetic strip useless now. She stared at it, willing it back to life. But the tiny light glared scarlet, final, irreversible. "No," she whispered. "This can't." But it already had. The clerk looked on in horror. "They're locked out of the system," he murmured. "They can't access anything. Not doors, not payroll, nothing." Phones recorded every flicker, every panic-stricken glance. Guests whispered in awe. One said, "He shut them down live." Another added, "This is what real power looks like." The manager tried one last defense, her voice shrill. "You can't do this. You can't just—" He cut her off with a glance, his words slicing clean. "I already have. You abused my guests. You tried to erase me. Now it's your turn to leave." The guard took a step back, his badge useless, his authority gone. The crowd parted not for him, but against him, a living barrier that refused to shield him anymore. The manager's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The applause started small, one pair of hands, then another. Within seconds, it swelled, echoing against the marble, drowning her out. And through the roar of approval, his voice carried, steady, unmistakable. "Justice doesn't need to shout, it needs to act. And this is the consequence of your actions." The staff who had mocked him, restrained him, humiliated him, were erased in seconds, their power stripped as easily as their access. The reversal was complete. The lobby, once buzzing with accusations, now pulsed with applause. Guests who minutes ago stood frozen in shock now clapped openly, their voices rising in support. Phones were still recording, but the tone had shifted completely. It wasn't outrage anymore, it was vindication. The manager and her staff stood paralyzed, stripped of their badges, their access, their authority. Every ounce of power they had clung to evaporated in front of 100 witnesses. Their humiliation was not hidden behind closed doors. It was public, permanent, undeniable. The man in white turned, not toward them, but toward the crowd. His voice carried evenly, each word precise, deliberate. "You saw it happen. They tried to erase my dignity in the very building I created. They called me a thief, a fraud, an intruder, when in truth, the only fraud was the way they wielded their authority." Gasps keyed into silence. The applause faded, leaving his words suspended in the air. "I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to raise my voice. Because dignity doesn't beg. Justice doesn't plead. It acts." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle across the marble hall. Guests leaned forward, hanging on every syllable. "Let this be a reminder," he continued, his tone unwavering. "Power isn't measured by who you can humiliate. It's measured by who you protect, even when no one is watching." Hezarand. Elena's eyes glistened, her relief now mirrored in pride. The older man in the gray suit nodded solemnly. A mother near the stroller whispered, "That's how a leader speaks." He lowered his phone, the line with Nia still open. "Close the audit. Save every file. The truth will stand longer than this moment." "Yes, sir," came the quiet reply before the call ended. Then he turned once more to the former manager, her defiance shriveled into silence. His voice was calm, final. "You tried to bury me in the lobby I own, but I don't need to film my justice. I am the result of it." The doors of the lobby opened automatically as he stepped forward. Guests parted like a tide, not to block him but to honor him. Phones followed, but no one intruded. They understood this was no longer a spectacle, it was history. And as he crossed back into the sunlight, applause surged again, not for revenge, but for dignity restored.